And okay, so Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So for those that are online, those are with us, those who are um, watching later. So this week's Parsha, we're going to be doing Vayechi, and it starts in Genesis 47 and verse 28, and goes through the end of the book of Genesis. So this is the last Parsha of the week. And, it is not a long one, but like most of them, it does cover a lot. And so there's a lot of information in this one. And again, we only scratched the surface on it. It's not, like I said, it's not that long. But one of the things that struck me, first of all, is that this is the 12th Parsha. And as we are looking at this parsha, that is called Vayechi, which means and he lives. And so it's actually going to be talking about the death of Yaakov or Israel and Yosef. And it also covers Yaakov's blessing over his sons, his 12 sons, or what's called the 12 sons, the 12 tribes. And so this parsha is the 12th, and it is found in the beginning, which holds the prophetic blessing over the 12 tribes, for the last days. And so, that was just something that just really stuck out with me right there at the beginning, is that it's linked with that number 12. And again, we've got the 12 tribes. And, I've been going through the tribe series. And so I'm not going to dive deep on each blessing of the tribes in this study, but instead I'm going to focus on other parts, because in the tribe studies, I'll look at the in depth on the blessing for each one of those tribes. So first of all, Vayechi is one of those unique parshas, because all the other parshas, when you're looking at a Torah scroll, will have a space between it and the next parsha. And so the next parsha will actually begin on a new line. However, Vayechi is what's called a closed parsha, which means it's not separated from the parsha before it. And so it's like it's just this big run-on sentence. So it's really connected to the last week's parsha, which was Vayegash. And Vayegash means to draw near. And so we think about, there's a connection between it and how he lived. And so this week's parsha, like I said, we're going to see the blessings, but it's basically a foreshadowing or a prophecy of what's going to happen in the end days. And so, thinking about that and it being a closed parsha is that we see the revelation of the end days falling in a parsha that's closed. And, really when, the rabbis say when you're looking at a Torah scroll and, they see those sections there like that laid out that way, and this space is missing, it's sort of like a red flag. It's drawing our attention here. And so why is this parsha closed? And I started looking up some research on it, and the rabbis say that this parsha is closed to show the condition of the heart of the people or the children of Israel, and that they really weren't able to hear and understand the end times. And so as I was thinking about this, I thought about, it's like a box being closed. And if it's closed, another way to say that is it's sealed up. And so that made me think of the verse in Daniel. So I want to go there first before we get into the parsha. So Daniel chapter 12. Daniel chapter 12. And I'm going to go down to verse 8. And he says, I heard this, but I couldn't understand what it meant. So I asked, Lord, what would the outcome be of all of this? And he said, go away, Daniel. For these words are to remain secret and sealed until the time of the end. And so, I got to thinking about, there are some things that are sealed, are closed until the end times, and that we're starting to see Yah reveal more and more about his word, and that the blessing over these tribes are relevant for the end times. So that means the tribes are in the end times. Well, we know they literally, those brothers literally didn't live until the end times, but their descendants have to be here somewhere. And so, I got to think about, well, do you believe in Yah, and do you hold to his ways? And are you grafted into one of those tribes somewhere? And so, if so, then those blessings are relevant for you in these last days. So, okay, so let's go to the parashah, and we're going to start in Genesis 47, and we're going to look at verse 28. Oops, sorry. Genesis 47, verse 28 is where I'm going to start. Okay. So Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt for 17 years. Thus Yaakov lived to be 147 years old. And the time came when Israel was approaching death. So he called for his son Yosef and said to him, "If you truly love me, please put your hand under my thigh and pledge that out of consideration for me, you will not bury me in Egypt. And rather, when I sleep with my fathers, you are to carry me out of Egypt and bury me where they are buried." And he replied, "I will do as you have said." And he said, "Swear it to me." And he swore it to him. And then Israel bowed down at the head of his bed. Okay, so we start with Yaakov living 17 years in Egypt, Mitzrayim, with Yosef. And remember, so these were the last 17 years of his life. But Yosef lived the first 17 years of his life in Yaakov's house in Canaan. And so 17, numbers have a meaning in Hebrew, and 17 is one of those special numbers, that, you can go and look and search all you want on that. But I wanted just to look at one aspect of the number 17, because 17 is actually the numerical value of the word good, tov. Okay. And tov is written tet vav beit. Tet vav beit. And so tov literally means, we translate it as good, but it literally means that something is functioning as it should. It's doing what it should be doing. Okay, so that is what really tov is. And the very first mention of this, so when we think about the first time that it's mentioned, of course, it's in Genesis. We're in Genesis, or ending Genesis. It's back in chapter 1 and verse 4. And this is the very first time we see the word tov. And it says, Elohim saw that the light was good, and he divided the light from the darkness. Okay, so, that's the very first instance of tov. Now, this is not the light of the stars or the sun or the moon here. This is prior to that, okay? And we've talked before about how this is really like the light of Mashiach. But one thing I want to look at this with tov is that when you look at the pictograph meanings, and if you go back to like the ancient Paleo Hebrew, the ancient Hebrew here, you gain a deeper understanding. So when you look at how these letters were formed, so the tet actually is a basket, okay? And it is like a wicker or clay basket. It's a container. It's going to hold something. And back then, containers were very important because a lot of the people were nomadic. So they're, carrying stuff. And not only were they carrying stuff, but it was used for storing like grains and other items. And then, the wicker ones, often were used for catching fish. So, and, so a lot of times, you have this basket, it can be, so the tet can be a basket. It means contain, it can mean store, and it's also, representing clay. And then this next letter in tov is the vav. And the Vav in Paleo looks like a tent peg. So it sort of looks like a Y. And it was used for securing or tying like the tent to the ground. And this was to keep like the ropes from slipping off and when the winds come. But the meaning of the Vav also has this paleo meaning of to add or secure or hooks something. And I taught back in Genesis, I think in when we did Bereshit, the first one, that in Genesis 1:1, where it says Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, that ve'et is translated as and, but it's actually Vav is the word and there. It's connecting. And what is it connecting? That Aleph and Tav is connecting Hashamayim, the heavens, and Haaretz, the earth. And so we've talked about who that Vav man is. It was the Aleph and Tav. In Revelation 1 and 8, it's Yeshua that's connecting the heavens and the earth. So that's the second letter, is that Vav, which is that connector. And then the last letter in Tov is the Beit. And the Beit in Paleo actually looks like a floor plan of a house. Okay. It's it's just a floor plan of like a house with an opening for the door there. And so, the Beit represents house, but it also represents the family or the importance of the house or those that are inside the house or the tent itself. And so when, looking at this picture, what I'm seeing for us is that the way that we, being this clay vessel, being this clay tet, are secured, or have this Vav, this hook that are secured to the house of Elohim, is being secured by the connector, the Aleph and the Tav. That was the picture that I was seeing here, that in this word Tov, that we've got this picture of us being a clay vessel, and we're secured to the house of Elohim by being connected to the Aleph and Tav. And all of that's linked with this number 17. So, and I think this was a prophetic picture that, Yaakov was being shown, was that Yosef, yes, he went away and he spent all of these years in Mitzrayim, but he is still connected to the house of Elohim, that he was given those 17 years, that assurance of being connected to the Mashiach. And that 17 is also linked with resurrection. So, they're looking forward to a day of resurrection here. So think about too, this, what we read was Yaakov, Israel, dying here. And, Israel, we're Israel. And this is a picture that we need to die. That we need to die to ourselves. We need to die to the old man, that wild man, that pagan man that's, wanting to do what things of the world and what our flesh wants. And that we need to die to that. And then we'll be able to really, truly follow him in Torah, in spirit, and in truth. Galatians 5. In verse 24. So Galatians 5 and verse 24. Moreover, those who belong to the Messiah Yeshua have put their old nature to death on the stake, along with its passions and desires. And so that's a picture of what we should do, being like Israel, that we are wanting to die to our old flesh. And it's also in Romans 6, in verse 6, interesting, 6:6. Knowing that we know that our old self was put to death on the execution stake with him, so that the entire body of our sinful propensities might be destroyed, and that we might no longer be enslaved to sin. And so, to, here, we want to do that. We want to make sure that we are putting our self, our flesh to death. And there was this song that you listen to a lot, Exodus Road Band, that they did a remake of that old song, Water Grave, which, talks about that in my house, there's, yeah, and you do that other one, yeah. But the one made me think about was the one Exodus Road Band where Water Grave, it says, in my house there's been a mercy killing, and basically it's talking about dying, this old man dying and then going, in the flesh, the old man is going to die and then going down to the river for a mikveh. And then the other one, what was the other one? Oh, go down to the river and pray, that old one too. So, and I will link in the video. Yeah, and that's about a mikveh too. Yeah, you're renewed, then that you're dying, your old flesh is dying. And so I'll link, those in the video so that way you guys can, if you want to watch those, you can. Okay, so going back to the parsha, we're in Genesis 47. Okay, and we're going to go now down to verse 29. It says, and the time came when Israel was approaching death. So he called for his son Yosef and said to him, if you truly love me, please put your hand under my thigh and pledge that out of consideration for me, you will not bury me in Mitzrayim. Rather, when I sleep with my fathers, you are to carry me out of Mitzrayim and bury me where they are buried. And he replied, I will do as you have said. And then he said, swear it to me. And he swore it to him. And then Israel bowed down at the head of his bed. And I wanted to go back over that because, I think about, how important Israel was. Yaakov was doing this. He was making Yosef swear to bring his bones back to the land. And we know, Yosef's been living 30 years at this point in Mitzrayim. And I think that, this is me, but I think that Israel's trying to get Yosef to have a connection to the promised land and not that of Egypt or Mitzrayim. That he wants him to understand and have a connection with his roots, and, I'm always amazed by, believers who have no connection to the land of Israel. Yes, the nation of Israel today does have a secular government, but it's not it's not the government that I'm connecting to. Yeah. Or like replacement theology that they're, they think they're only Israel but it's a connection to the land itself. And, this is Yah's land. Even the word says that he has his eyes on it day and night. And it's the land that he chose. And it's the land that, in the, the millennium, whatever you believe there is going to be ruled over by the tribes of Israel. And that, we're not going up to some place in heaven and stay up there. But it's the new Jerusalem that's coming down to a renewed earth on which we'll be living. So, I think, the land itself is important there too. And even in Hebrews 13, and verse 14 says, for we have no permanent city here. On the contrary, we seek the one to come. And I think, part of that was Yaakov is really wanting Yosef to realize, yeah, you may be living in prosperity. You're living in Egypt and you've got all these comforts and everything, but this is not your home. That your home is there. And it's not just that land that's there now, but there is going to be a renewed one that is going to be, that is going to come. And that, a lot of times we get caught up in the things of this world. And I think he's trying to bring Yosef back to that because, just think, Pharaoh basically was like a father figure for Yosef all those years. You know, he gave him a house. He brought him in. He gave him, you know, a position. He, you know, raised him up to a place of authority. He gave him a wife. You know, he was like this father figure for over 30 years for him. And then, you know, and so I think Yaakov is trying to say, you know, yeah, but this is not you. You have a promise, you have a connection here, and it's about more than that. Y'all have any thoughts on that or anything y'all want to say? No. Okay. Okay. So another thing that stuck out to me too is where, you know, that last verse where I said that, you know, that Israel strengthened himself and he sat up on his bed. Well, that word bed in Hebrew is mitah. And Yah often does like Hebrew word plays where the words have multiple meanings. And, you know, on a Torah scroll, you don't have the nikadot. You don't have these dots and dashes that give you the vowels for this. So you have to understand the context it's written to figure out what word it's really talking about. Because mitah is spelled mem tet he. Okay, mem tet he. And these are the same letters that are in the word mate, which is the word for tribe. So, you know, as you're, you know, looking at this verse again, you know, it's like after Yosef swears the oath to his father, Yaakov or Israel bows his head on the tribe or Yosef's head. And then later, as you know, he takes Ephraim and Manasseh, Yaakov or Israel is strengthened and he dwells on this tribe. And so, you know, it's got this double meaning there because you can read it either way. Yes, he literally did that, or was he literally putting his head on them and he was gaining strength for knowing that these are my descendants that are going to carry on in my way. So they're in the way of Yah. And then too, think about, you know, in that verse in Isaiah, Isaiah 46:10, which talks about at the beginning, I announced the end and that I proclaim in advance, you know, my plan, what I will do. And so, and that's just paraphrasing it, but that's just, you know, going back that this is in the beginning. We're in Bereshit. This is the last portion in Bereshit, and he's getting ready to announce the end, what's going to happen there. And so we have this picture of Yosef and Israel and this mate or this stick or this tribe. And that's a picture also that we see those three things. We see Yosef, we see Israel, and we see mate, a stick or a tribe, depending on how you want to translate that, in a prophecy all together that Ezekiel writes about, and he didn't write about it until about 1100 years later. And it's, you know, in Ezekiel 37, he talks about taking the two sticks, and it's about restoration. So, and that's just, you know, all of this I think is very, very prophetic. Okay, so going on then. Okay, in verse 40, chapter 48, verse 1, Genesis 48:1, it says, after a while later, someone told Yosef that his father was ill, and he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And Yaakov was told, here comes your son Yosef. Israel gathered his strength and sat up in the bed. So here's where we have, you know, he's gathering his strength. So when Yaakov, and I find it interesting, it says that when Yaakov heard that Yosef was coming, well, remember in last week's parashah and the week before that, we were talking about how these sons are all pictures have dual meaning or multiple meanings. that here we have Yaakov, and he heard that Yosef was coming and he was strengthened. And think about who they represent. Yaakov is also Israel, and Yosef is a picture of the Mashiach. So another way to look at that verse is when Yaakov or Israel heard that Yosef or the Mashiach was coming, Israel, is strengthened. And I was like, wait a minute, this is what it is for us. When Israel hears that Yosef or the Mashiach is coming, the Mashiach ben Yosef is, or the Mashiach ben David is coming, that Israel is strengthened. And that's what this verse also says when you realize who each one of these people are representing. And again, this made me think about another song. It's a Hebrew song called Ani Ma'anim. And actually it's read at the end of the morning prayers in the Siddur, and it talks about the Jewish belief in the coming of the Mashiach. Ani Ma'anim means I believe. So that's another one. Okay, so let's keep going. I stopped in verse 2, so let's go to verse 3. And Yaakov said to Yosef, El Shaddai appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me, saying to me, I will make you fruitful and numerous. I will make of you a group of peoples, and I will give this land to your descendants to possess forever. Now your two sons, who were born to you in the land of Mitzrayim before I came to you in Mitzrayim, are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be as much mine as Reuben and Shimon. So, here, first, like I said, I think it's connecting about the land, because he's talking about this is about the land. And he's also saying that, okay, your two sons that you had while you were in Egypt, that I'm going to bring them in, Ephraim and Manasseh. And, this is, a lot of people are looking at this, oh, well, Yaakov is adopting them. But really, they were already his descendants. They were his blood relatives. So he was their father, their grandfather, their ancestor. And so he really didn't have to adopt them in. But, because, think about their fathers or the patriarchs. But I think that the reason part of the reason, or one of the pictures that Yaakov was doing this, was because it's about the land. He was elevating them for the purpose of inheriting the land. And, this was another effort or strategy in order to keep the Egyptians' assimilation at bay. And by elevating them to the status of a son instead of a grandson, then they did have a right to the land then. Because as a grandson, he could leave it to Yosef, and then Yosef had the choice to do with it. He could left it to others. So, but it was for sure, he was elevating to the status of a son. So he was ensuring them a part in the land. And the inheritance isn't about money. The inheritance is about the covenant, the blessing, and the land. Because, he even tells them this is about the land right before this. And so in this, Yaakov is pronouncing something prophetic for the future of Yosef's family coming back to the land and taking this full inheritance in this, messianic era. And you think about why was it, not only so important to do that, but for these two grandsons, because they were raised Egyptian. They were part of their culture was Egyptian, whether or not you believe that Dinah is the daughter of, or that Osnat was the daughter of Dinah or not, that she was, raised as the daughter of this Egyptian priest. And that, these children probably grew up speaking the Egyptian language and looked Egyptian. And, so what is Yaakov doing? He's blessing them with an Israelite identity. You may look this way, but your heart, your part, he's tying them again to the covenant, to the blessing is in the land that Yah based on his descendants. And he's giving them this Israelite identity. And that's important for us, like being the returning house of Israel, that we are considered just like the full sons, just like he says, Reuben and Shimon, that Ephraim and Manasseh are not just adopted in, but they are going to be just like the full born sons. They're 100% Israel. So, and then, well, another thing I want to point out, if you go back to verse 4 there, and 48 verse 4, where it says, when he's talking about them, he says, I will make you fruitful and numerous. I will make of you a group of peoples and give you this land to your descendants to possess forever. Okay, so he says that he's going to make them fruitful and that they were going to multiply. They were going to become a multitude. But then he says, okay, well, I'm going to make you groups of people. That's the way the version that I read wrote it. But in Hebrew, it's a kahal, a congregation of a people, a congregation of people. And, if we think about, he's telling them that Ephraim and Manasseh are going to be like a congregation of people. In the Brit Hadashah, if we go over to Acts chapter 7, and verse 38, it says, this is the man who was in the assembly in the wilderness, accompanied by the Malach that had spoken to him at Mount Sinai, and by our fathers, the man who was given the living words to pass on to us. And it's talking about Moshe here. But notice what it says, that he was in the assembly in the wilderness. In the King James words, that he was in the church in the wilderness. And think about, isn't that what, the descendants are, Ephraim and Manasseh are called to be, that they're going to be an assembly of people. And we also see this same prophecy in Jeremiah 31. In Jeremiah 31, depending on which version you're reading, it may be verse 7, or it may be verse 8, depending on your version. But the version I'm reading is in verse 7. It says, look, I'm bringing them from the land of the north, gathering them from the far ends of the earth. Among them there are the blind and the lame, women with children, women in labor, altogether a vast throng returning here. They will come and pray as I bring them back, and I will lead them by streams of water on smooth paths so that they won't stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn son. And so, too, when they're talking about bringing them back, and that he is going to, gather them from the ends of the earth. And it says that they are a vast throng, that they're, in this version, it says vast throng or is returning. But in the King James, it words them that they are the remnant of Israel and that he's bringing them back. And it says, what was that? That a great assembly shall return there. In the Hebrew, it's actually where is there? There's going to be a great a kahal gadol. Sorry, I was looking at something else. And so that this kahal is in a reference not only to this congregation, this church or group that was in the wilderness, but it's also in reference to, with Jeremiah talking about the lost tribes of the house of Israel or Ephraim that are going to be returning, that they're going to be returning from the ends of the earth. which they were scattered. And we know this can't be just Yehuda, because when Yehuda was taken to Babylon, they only went to Babylon and then they returned. They weren't scattered to the ends of the earth. Now, let's go back to Genesis 48. And let's see. We get to where Yosef is going to bless them. And I'm going to skip down to verse 12. And Yosef brought them out from between his legs and prostrated himself on the ground. And then Yosef took both of them, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand. So Joseph's bringing them so that they can be blessed by Yaakov. And he brought them near to him. But Israel, Yaakov, put out his right hand and he laid it on the head of the younger one, Ephraim. And he put his left hand on the head of Manasseh. He intentionally crossed his hands, even though Manasseh was born first. Then he blessed Yosef. The Elohim in whose presence my fathers, Abraham and Yitzhak, lived, the Elohim who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day. The Malach, the angel who has rescued me from all harm, bless these boys. May they remember who I am and what I stand for, and likewise my fathers, Abraham and Yitzhak, who they were and what they stood for, and may they grow into a teeming multitudes on the earth. And to me, it just stuck out that, he's saying, you got to remember who I am and what I stood for. Don't forget not only, what I believe in. And then not only that, but then the other patriarchs, what they believed in. And then he says, that they're going to grow into a multitude. And that verb there, it says, let them grow into a multitude in the earth, is vayigdu. And this verb appears nowhere else in Scripture. And this is the only time that it's used. But when you look at the root of it, part of the root is, the way the word is conjugated, has at its root is daga. And daga means that they will become fish, because dog is fish. And so here, Yah is referring to them as being like fish. Well, if you think about the rate of breeding of fish, it's, they become like a multitude. That's why, we think about, Finding Nemo, and they become swarms in the water. And so I think that this unusual verb is used to designate the blessing, but it's also to get to you to realize that they're going to become a great multitude of people. It's not just, we think a multitude, there's going to be a lot, but they're going to be like a swarm here. There's going to be so many. And then, of course, Yosef gets upset because his father crossed his hands, and the order of this blessing for the birth order, which is interesting because Yosef was blessed, and he's blessed. He's not the firstborn. Yaakov skipped over in order to give him this blessing. And then now Yosef is saying, wait a minute, okay, Dad, you're doing it wrong. Here, this is the older one instead of the younger one. And he's like, no, I know what I'm doing here. And Yaakov tells Yosef that Manasseh is going to be a people, but that Ephraim is going to become this fullness of the Gentiles. And, in Hebrew, the phrase is melo hagoim. And so when you think about melo, it's from this malah, which means to be full or fill. It's also like to go up. So when you think about if you're going upstairs, la mala is upstairs, like to go up. So this melo hagoim, they're going to become full, or to the top of the nations. They are going to be full. And this is, referenced in the Brit Hadashah in Romans 11. In verse 25, he says, "For brothers, I want you to understand this truth, which Elohim formerly concealed, but now has revealed." So remember at the beginning, I was talking about how things were, concealed, and that even certain things start being revealed during time, and then a little bit more is being revealed. And so he was saying, there were some things that were concealed, but now after Yeshua here, we're revealing this to you. Okay. The Elohim has now revealed so that you won't imagine that you know more than you actually do. That it is stoniness to a degree has come upon Israel until the Gentile world or the nations or Ephraim enters into its fullness. Okay, so it's not talking about all the nations, but it is talking about what is this fullness of the nations here. It's going back to this phrase talking about Ephraim, that he is going to be the fullness of the nations. And that is in this way that all Israel will be saved. As the Tanakh says, that out of Zion will come the Redeemer, and he will turn away ungodliness from Yaakov. And so, they're going to be like this fish. They're going to be whatever number, which we don't know, Yah has assigned, that Israel is going to wake up amongst the nations. When that happens, and it's in his timing, that's it. And two, like I said, I'll put other links in there because there's, other, we did the one on the study about John and the fish, and, when they were, and that does give a specific number of 153, whether that ties in, I don't know. So, okay. So then going back to Genesis 48, and notice he says that, in verse 16, the Malak who has rescued me from all harm, bless these boys. May they remember who I am, what I stand for, and likewise my fathers, Abraham and Yitzhak, who they were and what they stood for. And may they grow into teeming multitudes on the earth. And then, so, again, he's basically saying, let, them remember, well, you're putting my name, you're putting Abraham and Yitzhak and Yaakov's name on these sons. Well, basically, in the name of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, talking about the patriarchs, it's also bringing them back to the covenant, that this covenant is part of their identity. And, Yaakov knew, like I said, that, Ephraim and Manasseh were raised as Egyptians. They were raised, Pharaoh was, very wealthy because Yosef made him even more wealthy. But here was Yosef. He was Pharaoh's right hand. He was living in this comfort and prosperity. And, they grew up that way. They probably led a very privileged life. And they were living outside of the land. Think about how many today are part of Israel that are living a privileged life outside of the land. They were born and raised in Egypt. They have no connection to the land. And Yaakov is trying to get them to remember it's about this covenant. And this covenant, one of the promises is its connection to the land. It's about this land here. Okay, so let's keep going. And I want to go to Genesis 49 now. And like I said, I'm not going to go in depth on all of the blessings here, but I do want to look at some of these. Okay, so in 49:1, then Yaakov called his sons and said, gather yourselves together, and I will tell you what will happen to you in the Aheret Hayamim, in the last days. Okay, so he's saying, gather yourselves together. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. And then he says, assemble, gather. That's the same word, yourselves together. And listen, sons of Yaakov, pay attention to Israel, your father. So, he's repeating himself about them gathering together here twice, and Yaakov is focusing on the future end times, what's going to happen to them. And, I think about like these two gatherings, I think are, mentioned here, that it's sort of paralleling, because one of the gatherings we think about was, them coming out of the Exodus, but there's going to be the second greater Exodus too, that is going to be, that was prophesied that we're going to see happen sometime in the end times. And I think that's a picture of why he's saying gather and gather, repeating it, because this is for the last days. Now, each one of Yaakov's sons are blessed, including Ephraim and Manasseh. And each blessing holds specific details for each tribe. So it's not just a general blessing, that you'll prosper, whatever. No, every one of them has a specific one. And so, like I said, I'm going through the tribe series again. So, you can go back and look at those. I actually put out yesterday. I did the other one on Shimon. And I did put a note up there about that I forgot to put in there about where they believe that Shimon is. So you can look at those too. But I do want to look at something else with this parsha. And this is where I want to zoom back out and look at the structure of it, because Tony Robinson does a great study on chiastic structure and how things line up. And I want to show you that. So I actually just copied what he had. And I'm going to put it up on the screen in just a second. Let me zoom out so you can see. And I want to show you here what it looks like. Okay. And that's why I want to show it on the screen, so that way you can see exactly how that chiastic structure looks. Okay, so can y'all see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So, yep. Okay. So if you look right here, and I'm just going to zoom up a little bit, that here I've got the verses laid out for you too, but I listed them as A. And this one is talking about, before he's dying, Jacob requested that his bones be taken up from Egypt. Okay, well, this one goes down with this one down here, A. In Genesis 50 in verse 22 through 26, before dying, Joseph requested that his bones be taken up from Egypt. See how they connect? They're both talking about the same thing. It's just different people. Okay. In Genesis 48 and 1 through 6, is perceived Jacob was ill. Joseph and his sons appeared before Jacob, and Jacob commanded his sons. Well, if we go down here to B, Genesis 50, 15 through 21, perceived Jacob was dead. Jacob's other sons appeared before him, and Joseph with the command from Jacob. So it's talking about the same thing. And each one of these line up until you get to the very center. And the central one is the theme of the whole thing. So when we look, and I've got them labeled all the way down A through M. And then you noticed it goes back. I tried to line them up exactly, but it didn't work out that way. But M is the center one. Okay. So this is the theme of this whole parsha. They're all pointing to this. Genesis 49 and 18, which in English says, I have waited for your salvation, O Yah. Okay. That is the theme of this parsha. So when you look at and take all those verses, they're pointing to this verse, because when you look at this is in the middle of the blessings over the children. And it's just sort of like stuck in there. That have anything to do with Asher. It's in the middle of his blessing that have anything to do with him. But there it is, sitting there right in the middle of his blessing. But when you look at that verse in Hebrew, let me slide back over here. Sorry. Okay. So when you look at that verse in Hebrew, Genesis 49:18, It is Leshuat Ha. It's hard to say that together. Kaviti Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Okay. And so Leshuat Ha is basically to your Yeshua, your salvation. Kaviti, I wait. Oh, yeah, is the way it's really written. And so think about what these prophetic pictures are all about. You know, he's going through and he's saying, this is about the end times. And these prophetic pictures are all about what? His return. And it's about, you know, Yeshua coming. And here is the central theme of this parashah, the whole parashah, which is a closed parashah, which has been sealed up into the end. And it's about his coming and what's going to happen at the end times. So I do want to just look at the blessing over Yeshua's tribe, since this is, you know, the theme is talking about Yeshua coming. I just want to look at just his and look at it in a minute. So let's go down to Genesis 49, verse 8. Okay. It says, Yehuda, your brothers will acknowledge you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down before you. Yehuda is like a lion's cub, my son. You stand over the prey. He crouches down and stretches like a lion, like a lioness who dares to provoke him. The scepter will not pass from Yehuda, nor from the ruler's staff from between his legs, until he who comes to him, until he comes to whom obedience belongs, and it is he whom the people will obey. Ooh, that was hard to read. And then tying his donkey to the vine, his donkey's colt to the choice grapevine, he washes his clothes in wine and his robes in the blood of grapes. And so, you know, when we're looking at Yosef's, you know, blessings later, we're, you know, going to see something different. But I want to just focus on Yehuda, because this is the line that Yeshua is coming from. And then the next verse says, his eyes will be darker than wine and his teeth will be whiter than milk. So first of all, you know, okay, we says the scepter is not going to pass from between him. Okay, so the lawgiver. So that means that this scepter, the kingship, is going to belong to Yehuda. Okay. It says until Shiloh comes. Okay. And Shiloh is written Shin Yod Lamed Vav. And even in Torah Messianic, whatever, believers, as well as Christians and Judaism alike, all believe that this is referring to the Mashiach, Yeshua, or they don't believe Yeshua, but Mashiach. And so that they see the Shiloh as being the Mashiach. But, you know, I also believe this is not only a picture that's addressing a general Mashiach, but Yeshua himself. And there's been many, you know, midrash on this, whatever, about who exactly Shiloh is and what does Shiloh mean. But Shiloh can be read as two different words in Hebrew. It can be read as she, lo. She in Hebrew means gift. And lo, which we think of, like for those who've been to Israel, think lo, no. But lo, no is written Lamed Aleph. And remember, the Aleph doesn't have a sound, but the dots on it makes it have that sound. But lo here is written Lamed Vav. And Lamed Vav lo means to him, like lach, laha. So it's lo is to him. So Shiloh is basically saying there's a gift to him or to the world. And that is what Mashiach is. Mashiach is a gift to the world. Now, as far as the root of Shiloh, some people say, oh, that it comes from the root shalach, which means rest, prosper, or to be at ease. But I also found that there were some that said that it is from the root shilia, which is interesting to me because shilia is actually the amniotic sac that a baby is born in. And that word shilia is actually used in Deuteronomy 28:57. Because I'm sitting here thinking, well, wait a minute, who is his father? His father is not really Yosef, but his father is Yah. And so here he is, this root is Shilia. Shilia is, from, coming shell is from Yah. Shel Yah, from Yah. He's where he's coming from. So Shiloh comes. In Hebrew, it says, until Shiloh comes. And that phrase, Shiloh comes, is Yavo Shiloh. Okay. And Yavo Shiloh, when you look at that phrase and write it out in Hebrew, it's Yod, which is 10, Beit 2, Aleph 1, Shin 300, Yod 10, Lamed 30, and then Hey 5. So Shiloh comes, Yavo Shiloh is 358, which is the same value as the word Mashiach. And, we've talked about that before, how even in one of the first parashas, how Mashiach has the same numerical value as the serpent. And because why? The serpent is going to be a counterfeit of the Mashiach. So Mashiach is 358 and Shiloh comes is 358. Now, Rashi, which, I don't agree all with what the rabbis say, but he wrote something here. He wrote that until Shiloh comes, that is King Mashiach, whose is the kingdom. And modern, Jewish liberal scholars hesitate to admit that this is going to be a reference, to a personal Mashiach. They don't see Yeshua being this personal, Mashiach here, that this is only going to be in reference to saving the nation of Israel. But, when you start looking at what he says here, it also, in this blessing, it says that Yehuda ties his donkey to a vine. So again, we've got a picture of the Mashiach, and he's this king that's coming at the end times. So, in Judaism, they're looking at it as the Mashiach ben David, and he's coming to him in the end times. But look at what it references here. He's not coming riding on this stallion or this big horse. It says that he's going to be riding on a donkey. And we know that the donkey is this beast of burden. And, when you look at this, when you think about, this beast of burden, it represents peace and well-being. And whereas a horse represents the military might, and he's tying it to a vine. And so if we go to the Brit Hadashah, go to Matthew 21. I mean, this is a perfect description of Yeshua coming into Jerusalem. In Matthew 21, starting in verse 1, okay, as they were approaching Jerusalem, they came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives, and Yeshua sent 2 Talmudim with these instructions: go into the village ahead of you, and you will immediately find a donkey tethered there with its colt. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, tell them the Lord has need of them, and he will let them go at once. This happened in order to fulfill what had been spoken of through the prophet. Say to the daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming to you, riding humbly on a donkey and on a colt, the offspring of the beast of burden. And what is this, what is this quoting? It is actually quoting Zechariah 9 and 9. And Zechariah 9 and 9 actually says, rejoice with all your heart, daughter of Zion. Shout out loud, daughter of Jerusalem. Look, your king is coming to you. He is righteous and he is victorious. Yet he is humble. He's riding on a donkey, on a lowly donkey's colt. And so, here they're talking about, that this is talking about Shiloh coming, but yet they miss the whole imagery that it's talking about him coming on this donkey and this donkey's colt, which is a picture of the Mashiach ben Yosef and not the Mashiach ben David. Because at Yeshua's first coming, he came riding on this donkey. But we see a difference when he returns. This is why we're seeing that the two Mashiachs, which Judaism says there's two, that we're seeing them as one person here, that he came riding on this lowly donkey, but when he returns, if we go to Revelation 19,
White horse.
Yep. In verse 11, it says, next I saw heaven open, and there before me was a white horse, and sitting on it was the one called Faithful and True, and it is in righteousness that he passes judgment and goes to battle. And so when we see him coming back, he's coming back on that horse. And in Yaakov's prophecy here over Yehuda, he also says that his clothes are going to be dipped in the blood of grapes. So they're going to be crimson. They're going to be red. Okay. And we can see this if we go to Isaiah 63. In the prophecy here, that even years later, Isaiah has this prophecy that he's given to Israel. And then we also see it with Yochanan. So in Isaiah 63 and verse 1, who is this coming from Edom, from Bozrah, with clothing stained crimson, so magnificently dressed, so stately in his great strength? It is I who speak victoriously. I will able to save. Okay. Who's able to save? Yeah. Okay. Why is your apparel red? Your clothes like someone treading a winepress. I've trodden the winepress alone from the peoples. Not one was with me. So I trod them in my anger, trampled them in my fury, so that their lifeblood spurted out on my clothing, and I have stained my garments. For the day of vengeance that was in my heart and my year of redemption hath come. And so, when we look at this, he's talking about he alone is the only one that's able to do this. He alone is the one who's, able to, he comes with this vengeance when he comes, and, the enemy is going to be, the people are going to be destroyed. What are you saying? No. Okay. And this we see in Revelation, when John's vision in Revelation 19, talking about, this rider on this white horse. In verse 2, it says, his eyes were like a fiery flame, and on his head were many royal crowns, and he had a name which no one knew but himself, and he was wearing a robe that had been stained in blood, and the name by which he is called is the Word of God. Okay, so we think about, well, who is the Word of God? Yeshua. Okay, so here it tells who he is, and that he's the one that has these garments that are stained. Now, if we, go back to, Yaakov's vision, Yaakov's blessing in verse 11, I want to read that again, where he says, tying the donkey to the vine, his donkey's colt to the choice grapevine, he washes his clothes in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. and his eyes will be darker than wine and his teeth whiter than milk. And so, looking at that, I think there's another picture that's being portrayed here, this, showing the restoration work done by Yeshua, because not only is the Mashiach from the tribe of Yehuda, but, just like this donkey is bearing a burden, Yeshua bears our burdens on his back like a donkey. And what happens to Yeshua? He is tied to a vine, a tree. He's nailed to a tree from which the blood is going to flow from him. And I think this is another picture, and that showed in this blessing. But when you look at it, that the donkey being a picture of Yeshua here. And that, it says that the people are stained with blood. Well, and that he's gonna have to cleanse us. In Isaiah, God, there's lots of them in Isaiah talking about this. I'll just go to a couple about blood. Let's see. Okay, Isaiah 4:4. If you want to jot these down, and I'll just read them. Isaiah 4:4, it says, when Yah washes away the filth of the women of Zion and cleanses Jerusalem from the blood shed in it with a blast of searing judgment. Okay, so again, we've got that blood there. Isaiah 66, and I'm going to start in verse 22 and go down, I think, to about 24. For just as the new heavens and the new earth that I'm making will continue in my presence, says Yah, so will your descendants in your name continue. Every month on Rosh Hodesh and every week on Shabbat, everyone living will come to worship in my presence, says Yah. And as they leave, they will look on the corpses of the people who rebelled against me, for their worm will never die and their fire will never be quenched, and they will be abhorrent to all humanity. So, and even in Isaiah 1:18, says that, oops, no, that's not one. Yeah, here it is. Isaiah 1:18. That come now, says Yah, let us reason together. Even if your sins are scarlet, they will be as white as snow. Even if they're crimson, red as crimson, they will be like wool. And then, in Revelation chapter 7 and verse 14, he says that, sir, I answered, and and he told me that these people are the ones who come out of the great persecution. They've washed their robes and made them white with the blood of the Lamb. Okay, so his washing our garments white, by how's he washing our garments white? By putting them in blood. And that's, a picture of, it's covering, it's clean, it's cleaning us. It's actually getting rid. His blood is going to remove the stain from us. It's going to set us apart and sanctify us. And it's also a picture of, like when you think about Yeshua's first miracle, it wasn't raising someone from the dead or healing someone. It was actually turning the water into wine. And, and what Yeshua told his mother at that, he says that, when this has happened, he says, oh, my time has not yet come. It's not yet time to do what? It's not yet time to cleanse the people. He turns the white water into red wine, and he does it on the third day, which is, interesting when you think about what Hosea is talking about, that on the third day that he's going to do that. Now, another thing with Yaakov's blessing here, and it's in verse 12, 49:12, it says, his eyes shall be darker with wine, and his teeth darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. And when you look at this, what we don't see in English, and we don't really see it on, if you've got a Hebrew software or whatever, you don't really see it there either. But if you actually look at a Torah scroll, that verse has an enlarged het in it. It actually begins with an enlarged het. So that first letter is enlarged. And so where it's talking about that his eyes will be darker than wine, and we think about het is the numerical value, is the 8th letter of the alphabet. And het is the new beginning. And so when Mashiach comes and he's got this fire in his eyes and his eyes are dark as wine, it's going to be a new beginning. That's when the new beginning is going to be. And not only that, but when we look at this whole parashah, not only do we have this one oddity, because Hebrew doesn't have capital letters or lowercase letters. So when there's one that's written much bigger, it's trying to get us to look at something there. But there's one more in this Torah portion, and it's over in chapter 50. So let's go over there, because it's right at the end, since we're talking about enlarged letters. In Genesis 50 and verse 23, it says, Yosef lived to see Ephraim's great-grandchildren, and the children of Manasseh's son Machir were born on Yosef's knees. Okay, that's the way the complete works. I'm going to read it out of the King James. Okay, the King James says, and Yosef saw Ephraim's children of the 3rd generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were brought up upon Joseph's knees. Okay, so when you look at that verse in Hebrew, and the King James actually words it a little bit closer to the Hebrew there, where it says Ephraim's children of the 3rd. Okay, and in the Hebrew, it's saying, but B'nai Shlishim. Okay, and the word Shlishim, being the 3rd there, ends in this letter mem, and the mem is written much larger. Okay, and the mem has a value in Hebrew of 40, which is the number of testing. And so, it's found in the word that's talking about the 3rd generation here. And we see that Yosef saw Ephraim's 3rd generation. Well, remember, Yosef is a picture of the Mashiach. And there is a passage that we see where it's got Mashiach and about these 3 generations. If we go to Matthew chapter 1 and verse 17, now it doesn't say 3 generations here, but there are 3 generations. It says in verse 17, thus there were 14 generations from Abraham to David. Okay, so that's 1 generation he's talking about. 14 generations from David to the Babylonian exile. So that's the 2nd generation he's talking about. And then the 3rd generation, which are 14 generations from the Babylonian exile to the Mashiach. So when you look at that, we've got a verse here that is pointing to the 3rd generations, and it's saying that Yosef saw the 3rd generation here, and that, remember, Yosef is a picture of the Mashiach. And so when you put them together, it's like saying, this is pointing to Yeshua, that he is going to see that 3rd generation. That was the 3rd generation, the 3rd group of 14 that he was coming from, that he was going to be born in this world, actually walking this world. And if you take these 2 letters in Hebrew that are enlarged and you put them together, they actually, the het and the mem spell the word ham, which is hot. So, what does that really have to do with our study? Well, when we think about when he comes, at the time of Mashiach's coming, it's going to be a time that's going to be hot or a burning for those who are not in the family. of Yah, that don't recognize their identity. They're not recognizing the Mashiach, and to think about too, that's why he's, he tells us that I wish that you would either be cold or hot. Don't be lukewarm. You make sure you're, cold or hot. It's better that you be one of those. Of course, we want to be hot for Yah, but not necessarily cold for Yah. In Revelation 20,
Excuse me.
in verse 14, says, then the death and Sheol were hurled into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And then anyone whose name was not found written in the book of life was hurled into the lake of fire. And so think about, that that hot has another picture here of, he wants us to be hot for him, but he's also saying that there is going to be a punishment for those who are not, and it is going to be this fire. Isaiah 1 and verse 27. It says, Zion will be redeemed by justice, and those in her who repent by righteousness. Rebels and sinners together will be broken, and those who abandon Yah will be consumed. You will be ashamed of the sacred oaks you desired. You will blush at the gardens you chose. For you will be like an oak whose leaf fades, like a garden without any water. The strong will be like tinder, and the idol makers a spark. Both will burn together, and no one will put them out. So again, it's that hot when he's coming. Okay, so I want to move over to chapter 50. Okay, so in Genesis 50, and I'll just start, I guess, just in verse 1 here, that it says, Yosef fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And then Yosef ordered the physicians in his service to embalm his father, so the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were spent at this, the normal amount of time for embalming, and then the Egyptians mourned for him for 70 days. And when the period of mourning was over, Yosef addressed the household of Pharaoh. I would like to ask a favor and tell Pharaoh, my father had me swear an oath, and he said, I'm going to die. You are to bury me in my grave, which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. Therefore, I beg you, let me go and bury my father, and I will return. And so here, we've got, he has, him embalmed, of course, because he's going to be carrying his body on this way. Don't want him stinking or anything. So, when you start looking at the Egyptian embalming techniques, and especially during the early dynastic period of around 5,000 to 4,500, 4,600. And it also continued up into the New Kingdom period, which is around 1567 to 1085. The body was dehydrated for 40 days. And the total embalming time took 70 days. So, and when we look at the timing, Yaakov would have died around 1647, And so this would have been right there at that time period, too. Now, I wanted to keep going in 50 because I wanted to look at something else here. So in verse 6, and Pharaoh responded, go up and bury your father, as he made you swear. So Yosef went to bury his father. With him went all of Pharaoh's servants, the leaders of the household, and the leaders of the land of Egypt, along with the entire household of Yosef, his brothers, and his father's household. Only their little ones, their flocks, and their cattle did they live in the land of Goshen. Moreover, they went up with both him with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very large caravan. So think about it, they're basically having this big, just like we saw with Jimmy Carter with his funeral this week, that they've had this big, huge procession, and it is happening. The Egyptians are doing this, and it's happening outside of the land of Egypt. They're going into Canaan to do this. Okay, in verse 10, and when they arrived at the threshing floor in Atad, beyond the Jordan, they raised a loud and bitter lamentation, mourning for his father 7 days. And when the local inhabitants of the Canaanite saw the mourning of the floor of Atad, they said, how bitterly the Egyptians are mourning. And this is why the place was given the name of El Mitzrayim, or the mourning of Egypt, and they're beyond the Jordan. Okay, so here it says they arrived at the threshing floor of Atad. Okay, in Hebrew, it reads Goren HaAtad. And Atad, which is basically, it's a field of thorns. Well, in Israel, we went to visit Neot Kedemim, which is actually a biblical reserve, nature reserve, that has this, they have every plant that's mentioned in the Bible growing there. And so, you can go around and do a tour, so they make sure that every, plant that's mentioned is actually there. And so the Atad plant is thought to be the plant that the crown of thorns that Yeshua wore is made from, because it's the only one that really has this thorn-like thing. And this is the one that actually the shepherds would use out in the fields to make these, to make like a fence to put the sheep in to protect them from the enemy. And so this is the Atad plant is the one where this, this thorns would come from, and in Matthew 27, it says, they wove this crown of thorns and they put it on his head, and, they fell down before him and they were mocking Yeshua and everything. Well, here we see that there is this bitter mourning and lamenting going on, and Yosef is in the Goren HaAtad. Well, Yosef is a picture of Mashiach, and Yosef is in, basically saying Mashiach is in this crown of thorns here. And all of Israel is weeping for their father. So this is, to me, this is like a prophetic picture of, yes, Yeshua, that this is, here's a picture of Yosef and all of Israel coming to bury their father. But when you see where they do it and what the name means, that this is a prophetic picture of Yeshua's death and all Israel weeping for the father. And notice that it says that the mourning period lasted for 7 days. And that's, sitting Shiva in Hebrew, that's why Jews today, they, actually have the mourning period for 7 days there. And there are specific rules on what you can and cannot do during that time period. But Zechariah 12 and verse 10. In Zechariah 12 and verse 10 says, I will pour out on the house of David and all of those living in Jerusalem a spirit of grace and prayer, and they will look to me whom they pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only son. They will be in bitterness on his behalf, like the bitterness of a firstborn. And so, just like, that's why I said that picture there to me is standing out, that this is a picture of, it's a prophetic picture of Yeshua's death and the great mourning that we're going to do if he comes back while we're alive. So now, okay, Yosef made Israel promise to take his bones back to the land too. If we go down to verse 25, Genesis 50 and 25, it says, and Yosef made the children of Israel take an oath, saying, Elohim will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. Okay, so make sure you carry me out too. And, I know that this is referenced in Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 22. It says, by faith, Yosef, near the end of his life, remembered about the exodus of his people, Israel, and gave instructions about what to do with his bones. And so we're told that, Moshe, does see to it in Exodus 13 and verse 19. Moshe takes the bones of Yosef when they leave Egypt. He goes and gets the bones of Yosef and he takes them to the promised land. And just like, Yosef made them promise that they would do. And so just like Yaakov makes Yosef promise to return him to the land, Yosef makes the children of Israel promise the same. And so all of Israel then comes out of Egypt. It's not that one of them's buried there, not a one of them is left behind. They all come out of Egypt and no one is left behind. So, and that was, I don't want to go into the specifics on all of the blessings there this time because I will do that otherwise. But I did want to, just look at a couple of those. And this is, the end of a book. And usually at the end of the reading of a book of Torah, we say Hazak, Hazak, Ve Nitzahek, which is be strong, and be strengthened because you finished a book. And so, let his words go into our heart and be strong and strengthened in his word. So, so do y'all, does anybody else have anything they want to say on it or no? Questions, comments? Everybody, I know it's so quiet. Since I started recording, everybody gets so quiet. They don't want to say anything. So, okay.
Man.
So this here.
I'm gonna get ready. We'll have the blessing. You got it?
Mm-hmm.
Yemereka kaya haba virishmei reha. Yair Yahava Pinava Ileka Behuneka Yesayahava Pinavileka Vayeshim Leka Shalom. May Yahava bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face to shine on you and show you his favor. May Yahweh lift up his face towards you and give you peace. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. Sar Shalom. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Amen. Has anybody been following the what?
I was just going to say that those links and stuff, when I do the video, I'll put those links in the comments or up at the top part so that if you wanted to click on, look at some of those other things that like the song and stuff, I'll put in there too. So
I didn't know how much anybody was kind of following those the devastating fires in California. If you